All right, so the media's got a new golden child for Take Down Trump Monday. We got Peter Strzok's been fired. It's about time. And now the white supremacists were marching in D.C. this weekend for Unite the Right rally. So let's go ahead and get into this. It's been a busy day and a busy weekend. So 3 stories that honestly I usually would not care about at all. So we're going to start off with the easy one. If you're on this channel, you probably know who Peter Strzok is. In case you didn't, he was part of the lead of the Hillary Clinton investigation and the Trump-Russia collusion investigation when it was just kind of the counterintelligence inside of the FBI before the special investigator was done. And if you haven't been following the story, you'll see a lot of, go look into his text where he's talking about insurance policies in case Trump wins and how they're not going to prosecute Hillary months before they ever even interviewed her, and about how other people are in the campaign. So there's a lot of surrounding him, and there's hundreds of, actually there's tens of thousands of texts, and he was having an affair with another person in the office, and it's taken 2 years to get him fired. So, and there should be another Inspector General report coming out pretty soon that's going to really nail him on. So I believe this is why he was fired. But normally I wouldn't really care about this story because it's part of the Mueller investigation and kind of the background into that. And since we don't really know what's going on completely with that, we're getting dribs of evidence from the FBI and the security or the Secretary of State Department. So, and the intelligence agency. So I'm going to kind of set that aside for right now. But the man should have been fired a long time ago. And the fact that it took 2 years in Washington, D.C. to get this guy fired is just unbelievable. The second big story today was Omarosa. She's got a new book deal. It's called Unhinged. And really it's about, she says it's the decline of the mental state of Donald Trump. Now she, from what I understand, I never watched Donald Trump's reality show, but apparently she's been working with him for 10 or 12 years, and she campaigned with him. And, you know, when he first got into the White House and Trump was saying he was going to put together the very best team, he made a ton of errors and hiring mistakes. But to be honest, I really can't fault him for that because he was never in politics. He doesn't really have these connections. So if you were thrown into the president's office and you had to come up with 4,000 names of job positions you had to fill, you wouldn't know anybody either. So you take recommendations and you take people you know. So he hires her in as an assistant PR person. Apparently she was fired 3 times in the White House over the course of a year. And Trump would intervene and get her hired again. And she was let go. And the big story there is that General John Kelly, who is now the chief of staff for Donald Trump, brought her into the Situation Room where she brought a recording device where no phones are allowed. This is where if the country's going to war, it's happening in the Situation Room. Anything that's happening top secret national security as it's happening is done in the Situation Room. Kelly brought her in there to let her go. Apparently she was known for making a scene in the White House. I can't verify that, but it's been brought up a few times over the weekend. So they wanted to kind of let her down. And apparently she was pulled out by the Secret Service after this by trying to sneak into the White House's residence. And then she tripped a tripwire from the Secret Service, and they actually had to go pull her out of the White House after she was let go. And then she called Trump, which she made a recording of the call, Trump saying that she was fired. And he said that he didn't know and that he did not love that she was gone. But he wasn't going to intercede. So she's out today saying really 2 main points, or 3 main points. One, that Trump tried to, or that John Kelly tried to bribe her with a do-nothing, show-nothing job where she would be paid $15,000 a month not to show up or to work from home on his re-election campaign in 2020, and she had to sign non-disclosure agreements. Well, General John Kelly said that she was let go for serious, in the recording of the tape, for serious violations of security protocols, and it really sounds like they didn't like her, and she was running around recording everybody. She says that she has dozens to hundreds of recordings of people in the White House that they didn't know that they were recording. And the whole rule that kind of came in, if you heard about 7 or 8 months ago, where they came in with a rule saying that no cell phones were going to be allowed in the White House anymore. Apparently this rule was because of her. And normally, you know, it is just a fired employee from the White House. If you followed other, you know, President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, anytime any high-ranking official leaves the White House, they will write a book. And they always try to make it as salacious as possible to sell as many copies as possible. And they usually get big book advances. So, but what makes this one interesting is that she has multiple recordings of people in the White House and conversations. And the two biggest claims she's making is, one, that Trump is not in charge of the White House, that he's just a figurehead, and the actual person running it is John Kelly. Now, I'm just going to dispute this, because if Donald Trump was not in charge of the White House, they would have taken his phone away from him. He would not be tweeting. And you could see multiple times John Kelly is, you know, he doesn't like everything that Trump does. And, you know, it really goes against the narrative that John Kelly's been trying to leave all year, or is going to quit any moment. So if he's really running things, why would he want to quit? So I'm not really sure I believe that claim. And the other claim is that she heard from somebody else that heard from somebody else that heard a tape that Trump uses the N-word on it. I have no idea if this is true. Now, the two people that she names that she heard it from, and the person that actually heard the tape, both of them say that the tape doesn't exist. She doesn't know what they're talking about. After she made the claim, and those two people came out and said they've never heard a tape, they've never talked about that, they don't know what she's talking about. The next day she said that after she completed the book, that she was actually invited out to Hollywood, where she was given access to the tape, and that she heard the tape, and that she believes that it is being held on to until November. So we'll see if that materializes. Is this just a big publicity stunt, or she just trying to sell books, or is there something really there? It's kind of a wait and see moment. Normally with these things, give it 2 or 3 weeks, nobody will remember. But for this weekend and on Monday, she was the golden child. That, you know, she's the person who has been close to Trump for a dozen years, and now is calling him unhinged and racist. And, you know, there's a lot of back and forth here, but that most of the time I wouldn't even care about a story like this except for the tape. So let's go ahead and see where that goes. But I think, and another story that I would usually ignore, because, you know, the news always blows these things out of proportion, was the Unite the Right kind of white supremacist, white nationalist movement that happened over the weekend. But I feel like I want to talk about it in this forum, because it's really an example of how the mainstream media or the news works. So, you heard all week that there was going to be this white supremacist, the white nationalist protest was going to happen that was going to happen in D.C. this weekend. It was going to be near the White House. And that, you know, this was kind of Charlottesville Part 2. It was on the anniversary. It was run by the same organizer. And then Saturday came, and that's when the protest was happening. And honestly, on the Unite the Right part, the white supremacist, white nationalist part, it was really kind of a dud. The biggest estimate I've heard of the amount of white supremacists or white nationalists that actually showed up for this thing ranges from about 20 to 24 people. So let's call it 3 dozen. Let's take a super high end. 3 dozen people showed up to this rally. Now, the peaceful protesters, and we're going to go quotes here, the peaceful protesters, Antifa, Black Lives Matters, you know, different various liberal organizations, and from what I understand, even a couple conservative organizations even came out just to protest against these, you know, white supremacists unite. And actually a lot of conservatives, if you remember back in Charlottesville, that person jumped in a car and drove through the crowd and killed a woman. And a lot on the right in the conservative movement were actually setting up donations to her mother to help for different organizations and charities as a way to counter-protest kind of the white supremacist message that was being done in DC over this weekend. See, but this is where I think it gets really interesting with how the news operates. And this is what I really want this channel to be a lot about, is kind of the political strategy of not just politicians, but of the news and kind of how we get influenced in things. So you got a rally where 2 to 3 dozen people show up, and you have hundreds to, I think the upper number I've heard is like 1,000 people kind of counter-protesting this. So we're really talking about 1,000 people overall this happened. Now, I know I can already hear the liberals and the Democrats screaming that this is not all of them, but, you know, go watch the videos of all the violence that happened this weekend. You had a cop on the ground getting stomped by people and then getting up, and other cops pulling him off before he could respond to the people who were fighting him on the ground. You had another, I think it was an old guy, or it was another guy was getting stomped by 6 Antifa people, and another person had to run and basically covered the person's body because they were getting beat up by these Antifa people. And if you really kind of go through it, an NBC reporter was beaten up. They smashed reporters' cameras, and this wasn't the 2 dozen white nationalists or white supremacists that showed up. These were the peaceful protesters. And okay, it's not even really the peaceful protesters. It's this group, Antifa, that think they're fighting fascism. They're really the radical left. And they're showing up at all these. And they were at Charlottesville last year, too. And they show up on Berkeley. They're the ones who destroy the campus when Ben Shapiro tried to show up, and that they had to have like 200 police officers there just to extort Ben Shapiro away from the campus because of these people. And if you go on YouTube, you'll find multiple videos of anybody that they feel is on the right or conservative or might even support Trump. They will run around with metal batons and beat them. You'll find videos of them stomping old men, punching old men and women. And they're really kind of this militant arm of the left that's honestly is growing. And this is where I kind of want to get into the media, because that. So I watched Fox News a little bit today, and you saw a little bit of it on there, but even they didn't talk about it much. The story kind of rolled into this Omarosa and then Peter Strzok today. But if you look at NBC and CNN was the big one. You had 24 people show up to a white supremacist rally, and you had 13 people on one panel on CNN talking about how this is a super racist nation because these 24 people showed up to this rally when 1,000 people showed up to counter-protest them. So it was kind of this interesting dynamic of you had wall-to-wall coverage for a week of this rally before it happens. And everybody's worried, you know, it's going to be Charlottesville Part 2, about there's going to be super violent, and all these white supremacists were going to show up, and it turned out to be 24 people. To be honest, they're garbage human beings. If you're a white supremacist and you think, you know, anybody's beneath you based off of race, you're just a garbage human being. And to be honest, I'd prefer if you weren't even watching this video. But, you know, it's your right to go out there and protest or, you know, do a demonstration. So, you know, it is what it is. You know, freedom of speech has a two-sided coin. As much as good comes out of it, there's just as much bad that comes out of it. And for the most part, you just got to kind of sit down and take it. But, you know, it just kind of goes to the fact of this Antifa group and a couple of the other people that were fighting cops and throwing bricks and cussing out cops and beating up people on the street and stomping them. None of this even got covered. And then what you were told was that it was the white supremacists who were being violent, when it was 24 people who were actually escorted away as soon as it started to rain because they were worried for these people's safety. And they kind of took off after about an hour or two. So there really was nothing to this story, but we heard about it for 7 days. And it really turned out to be nothing. But if you go look at CNN and MSNBC today, they're still talking about it. And it really was nothing. So, you know, they're really trying to stoke the flames of kind of the racial divide in the country, where, yes, Trump spits off at the mouth too much, and I really don't like that, you know, he always calls people low IQ people or dumb people, you know, like Don Lemon, LeBron James. I don't even like that he calls Maxine Waters low IQ. You know, she's in Congress. She, you know, she's done it well for herself. All these people have done very well for themselves. They're not low IQ people. They're not dumb people. They may not be into politics as much as you want, but really what I'm getting worried about here, and I can already see people screaming about this, but what I'm really worried about is how much this is starting to look like, Antifa is starting to look like the brown shirts. If you go back to the Nazi regime, which I hate to tell you this, people, the Nazis were not right-wing. They were a socialist party. Conservatives and Republicans do not believe in socialism. We do not believe in communism. We believe everybody should free, that government is not in your life. Nazis were a nationalist socialist party. They took over the country. When they wrote up their Nuremberg laws that made Jews second citizens, they looked to the Democrat South. They took the laws that the Democrats put in, which we call the Jim Crow laws now. They took those laws and imported them into Germany so that they could oppress the Jews. And that's where, you know, kind of the whole start of the Nazi kind of machine happened. And here's the thing. Everybody acts like the Nazis just took power one day, they grabbed all the Jews, and they threw them straight into the furnace. This is not how it happened. There was a slow campaign. First, you had to demonize the Jews. Then you started getting people that we call now the brown shirts. These were people who affiliated themselves with the party of the Nazis, but they weren't really part of the party, and they were disavowed at the time as extremists. Just like Antifa now is being disavowed as extremists. But what they did was they ran around, and anybody who did not agree with them were beaten, stomped, attacked, killed if they could. They fought the government at the time, saying that it was illegitimate. And these are how the Nazis eventually ended up taking power, and how they eventually moved into their large-scale genocide of the Jews. It wasn't they woke up one morning and started killing all the Jews. It was a slow buildup of a demonization. And then once you demonize somebody, it becomes easier to attack that person, because then they're not a person anymore. They're an evil human being. That it's okay to attack that person. And then you kind of move into other things. And we already see this a little bit. So you got Antifa, which is a small group. And everybody would say, well, it's a small group. Yes. But if you look at our Revolutionary War, that only involved 12% of the country. Most of the country was actually for staying with Britain. They didn't want a Revolutionary War. They didn't want to be involved in it. But essentially 10 to 15% of the country drug the rest of the country into a war with Britain. So a small part of the country, just 1 in 10 people, is enough to start a revolution. I mean, that's 30 million people in this country at this point. So, and it wouldn't even take that many. All it takes is a few million people, and that's a good-sized army. So, you know, we really got to be careful here. And things like, you know, when Maxine Waters yells, tell them they're not welcome here anymore. That if you see them at a gas station, run up to them and harass them. Let them know that they're not welcome. When Jeff Sessions goes down to a restaurant in Houston over the weekend and takes a picture with the owner's son, and then he has to take down his website after he puts it up on social media because of the harassment that they were getting, and then he had to apologize for taking in a picture with the Attorney General. You want to abolish ICE, you want to, you know, you had Elizabeth Warren over the weekend saying that law enforcement is absolutely racist from top to bottom. You know, this is really the demonization of a group of opposite political beliefs. This has really moved past into a spirited debate. Like you see Ben Shapiro challenged Alexandra Cortez to a debate. And the first thing that she says is that he's a man with bad intentions and pulled out the sexist card. And never, I mean, All she had to do was say no or ignore it. But no, she had to move to the sexist card, which then makes it a big story and kind of degrades that whole process. So, you know, we're really in the middle of all of this, and I'm really starting to see some similarities kind of pop up between the brown shirts back in the old days and Antifa. And I know everybody's going to say, well, Trump is this, and everybody tries to affiliate the Nazis with the right, but that's really not the case. And, you know, the first movie ever shown in the White House was Birth of a Nation. It was shown by a Democrat president. Democrats came to go see it by the Democrat-founded group, the Ku Klux Klan. And it was their movie. That was the first movie ever shown in the White House, was a Democrat production of Birth of a Nation made by the Ku Klux Klan and then showed for a Democratic president in the White House. So, you know, the history of racism is there, and just kind of the oppression, you know, it gets hard when you talk about this, because the Democrats have done a great job of kind of erasing their history from pre-1970 to kind of become the party of passion. But if you actually look at a lot of things that they did in the past, a lot of these people are still in power now. You know, I'm just getting worried that, you know, when you tell people that they're not welcome here based off of their political beliefs, when you're telling people to go out and harass these people, when you have people openly talking about killing the president across the street from the White House, and you have people saying that you should kill conservatives because they must be racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, and any other type of phobic you can think, we're really getting into dangerous territory here. And I know the left keeps screaming that the right is Nazis, but go look at the history of how the Nazi Party came into power and how they treated the Jews before Hitler really took over and they started turning into the Jewish ghettos and everything. You are going to see a lot of similarities here. So let's hopefully calm down the rhetoric a little bit. Let's just remember that we're all Americans here, and, you know, let's just try to work for the betterment of a majority of people in the country. Yes, not every law is going to save every single person. We wish it would, but not every law is going to be perfect. There's always going to be somebody left behind. When you do tax cuts, some people aren't going to get as much as others. You know, there's a lot of difference here. But, you know, the whole point of this country was that we were all supposed to be equal and have equal opportunities. And we haven't fulfilled that dream yet. But I keep pulling for it and I keep hoping for it, and hopefully one day it's going to become true. So that's kind of my video on kind of the thoughts on how this weekend kind of went and how the news media is operating. And hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow night.